If I need to redo something, I can simply say, hey, let's redo that question. Or,
yeah, that's
okay,
fine.
because you're going to edit. It's not one.
It's not. I try not to do it. I tell people the only thing that hits the editing room floor is my feet.
I got it.
So. All right, before we start this episode of Riding Shotgun with Charlie, I'm glad that you guys are all here. Thank you for tuning in. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do. If you, after you subscribe to the YouTube channel, please hit the notification bell because that's good for all of the analytics. If you're listening to the show in podcast form, you can certainly leave a positive review because that is always appreciated as well, and it's good for all the podcast stuff. So glad you guys are here. Thank you for watching the show, and share the show with your friends because that is how we get the stagecoach across America. All right, welcome to this episode of Riding Shotgun with Charlie. Today we are in the hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, and I have Jonathan Goldstein with me. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Charlie, thanks for having me. Grateful for the opportunity.
This is what I'm excited about. I'm excited that someone flew to me to do a show. Because usually it's me chasing people around the country.
That's great.
But this is great. So I've had an opportunity to talk to a number of the reform candidates, and you are one of the reform candidates. So we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about all things NRA. And
sounds great.
Talk about your legal practice and the stuff that you've been doing to fight for our gun rights for the NRA and for the people of Pennsylvania.
That sounds great. Really looking forward to it.
Pennsylvania is also a Commonwealth, right?
It's true. We're one of, I think it's three. It's Virginia, it's Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts is the third one, right?
Welcome to the Commonwealth.
That's right.
That's the welcome to the Commonwealth is my rally cry for it sucks here. Right? the laws don't make any sense, and it's really stupid.
Yeah, our laws make a little bit more sense down in Pennsylvania, but when I look at some of the other states, Boston's one of the ones that's a little bit of a head scratcher.
A little bit.
Yeah.
It's completely nuts. We had a law pass here recently that is it's all the bad stuff. And I love that everyone is in a pissing contest to say who's got the worst laws in each of the states.
Well, you have some states that, in the wake of Heller and, McDonald and ultimately Bruen and then the New York State Rifle and Pistol, the states that are not friendly to gun owners are really left just turning the world upside down to try to frustrate our rights. And my good friend from the NRA, who I miss dearly, who passed away a number of years ago, Chris Conte, used to talk about how places like New Jersey were the North Korea of gun ownership. just awful places to be a gun owner. Oh, and Massachusetts is doing its best to get up there alongside New Jersey.
It really is. Yeah. Over the last year, I spent $625 to get a New Jersey permit.
Yeah, and then what they do is you get that permit, and half the places you'd be able to expect to carry, they put off limits that, they're trying to dive for that loophole of sensitive places, the New York State Rifle and Pistol case, where they said you can't just declare all of Manhattan to be a sensitive place. Sorry, New York. Right. That's the last refuge of all the hacks trying to limit our rights.
Yeah, I was doing, after the Bruen decision went through, I was doing an episode of the Polite Society podcast, which we don't do anymore, but it was me and Paul Lathrop, who was the host of the show. And we did the show in video, we did the show in audio, and Paul had this really cool software that made it look like a real TV show.
Right.
So he would, if I was talking, he would hit the button and it would just be me on the screen, and then we're talking back and forth, it's the both of us. And so he hits the button and it's me on the screen, and he forgets about this. And he reads for 7 minutes all of the restricted places in New York. And I'm like, I don't feel like I can interrupt him.
Yep.
I'm just sitting there.
But the fact that it took 7 minutes tells you a little something about what they're trying to do.
I'm trying not to itch my nose, and I'm like, it's just me on here doing nothing, right? Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing. And really the goal is to frustrate the gun owner, right?
Make them give up.
When we have these debates on the public policy side in Pennsylvania, one of the things I try to explain to legislators is the thing you want someone to do is to get dressed in the morning, put that gun on their hip,
Mhm.
and then not touch it all day.
Right.
That's what you want. What you do not want them doing is holstering and unholstering all day long.
All day
You don't want them standing outside their car, putting a gun in the trunk, taking a holster off. First of all, the modality that works best today is concealed carry, not open carry. It used to be there was a time where you were considered to be sinister if you were carrying concealed. You wanted to carry open.
Right.
That was sort of a 19th century sentiment. Today, we want people carrying concealed. It freaks out the soccer moms when somebody's standing outside of a post office, standing outside of some other sensitive location, a school, a bar, because you can't go inside a place that serves alcohol, whatever the legislature in that state is trying to do. Now you got somebody standing outside of it, unholstering a gun, taking a belt off, sticking it in their car,
Right.
who's watching them, the guys that want to steal stuff out of cars. It's a terrible idea. Put that gun on, leave it on, and don't touch it.
I'm with you. Mom's the word.
Yeah.
One of my good friends is John Petrolino. He's a New Jersey resident. For the first 2 years after Bruen, his permit was issued by a judge, and he could carry, but not while he's driving.
Right.
So he goes to his house, goes from his house to the car, unloads, goes to the store, loads, goes into the store, shops, comes out, unloads, goes to the next place. And I'm like, that's exhausting, man.
Well, it's also emblematic of a total lack of both personal knowledge on behalf of the permit granting apparatus in your state, and it's also a lack of respect for those folks, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
anybody who's ever carried a gun knows what a pain in the keister it is to be loading and unloading and loading and unloading and loading and unloading all day long. It's just not reflective of the way most people want to do it. Nobody wants to think, oh gosh, I have a chapstick in my pocket. I can't go into this bar with a chapstick in my pocket. I got to leave it in my car. And if I don't leave the chapstick in my car, it's a felony. I mean, it's insane, right? And it's just totally shows a lack of understanding of what the gun owner goes through. And, that gun owner, by the way, is, let's call him a supplemental force. Let's call him a force multiplier for our police. And
Right.
for our public safety officials, right? In most cases, in most states, we've vetted that person. He's got a background check. Why wouldn't you want that guy to be part of the fabric, right?
I had a discussion with somebody a couple weeks ago, and we were, it was over an adult beverage.
Right.
And we were talking about gun stuff, and she's like, so I understand you're a gun guy. How do you feel about this? I'm like, well, I think people should carry machine guns if they want. Like, I'm down with with a Glock
Right.
18. And she's like, well, they shouldn't be carrying these, but whatever. She was a Republican too, right?
Right.
But anyway, I said, listen, here's the deal. We have background checks. If a person goes through and passes a background check, they're not a criminal.
Right.
Who do you want carrying guns, criminals or non-criminals?
Right.
The criminal, just because you have a gun doesn't mean you're going to start committing crimes, for God's sakes.
Well, indeed, what we know from solid research in this area is that concealed carry permit holders in most states commit crimes at lower rates than even law enforcement officers.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you go up and check out John Lott's website, and he's got the data on this. He studied it. Armed civilians are a really, really important part of suppressing crime. We know that the diffusion of permit holders through a body politic lowers all kinds of crime rates for armed robbery and sex assaults and burglary and everything else. And we also know that law-abiding gun owners do commit crime at lower rates than law enforcement. So
lower rates than law enforcement.
yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy.
It's nuts.
To deny these folks. And frankly, what you're doing is you're denying the public the coverage that these gun owners, present. Whenever I run into to neighbors or friends who say they don't want to, carry a gun, I tell them, no worries, it's fine. You actually live under the penumbra of my gun ownership. The fact that I carry a gun keeps you safer.
Yeah.
You're welcome. You're
Right?
welcome.
You're welcome.
I got you covered.
I love it.
Yeah.
We're in the BU area.
Yeah.
This is we're on Commonwealth Ave, or Com Ave as we call it,
Right.
and we're right in the BU neck of the woods.
Last time I was here at BU, my parents were showing me where they went to college. They met here in the 70s. They were actually, as I recall, in Howard Stern's graduating class.
No
Yeah,
way!
at BU. Yeah,
That's too
in the
cool.
1970s.
It's Howard Stern.
Yeah. in a while.
I used to like Howard Stern.
Yeah, he's kind of lost his way on some issues.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, who cares about Howard Stern?
Yeah.
Let's talk about you. I always like to find out how people became gun guys.
Right.
How did they get into this?
Well, so I went to college in Philadelphia and stayed there after I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. And in 1994, they were redoing the gun laws in Pennsylvania. And there was a lot of back and forth. This is, 10 years, I guess, pre-Heller. The Second Amendment was still essentially written out of the Bill of Rights. So this was a state level argument. People weren't really thinking about, what a federal right was here. And as they started to get into the back and forth negotiating the gun bills that were going to go through the legislature, there were a lot of people that were really passionately opposed to expanding the right to carry. Philadelphia, in fact, had a special set of laws that applied only to it. By the way, notwithstanding the fact that our state constitution had a uniformity clause in it. Laws were supposed to be uniform across the state.
Right.
The legislature had a number of years prior found a way to circumvent that uniformity requirement by setting up classes of cities. And the state Supreme Court said, each class of municipality, the laws had to be uniform in that class, but they didn't need to be uniform across the classes. Completely ignoring what was going on with the state constitution. Well, don't you know there were only one city of the first class in Pennsylvania, and that was Philadelphia. Sure. And that was their way of isolating Philadelphia and passing special laws that just apply to Philadelphia. Yeah, so Philadelphia's coming, the legislature's coming up with all these restrictions they want to impose on Philadelphians. They're coming up with all these restrictions they want to impose, across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I start to think to myself, what is it that these politicians intend to do to me that my ownership of firearms is so threatening to them? So I decide I'm going to get involved. I'm going to go buy a gun, see what's involved with buying it, with owning it, with carrying it. And that's when I really started to get involved in gun ownership. And cool. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed shooting. I really enjoyed, knowing that I had a gun, that I had trained myself properly, that I'd sought out the correct training, that I knew what the law was, and it started to make me more comfortable in my skin. And next thing I know, I'm getting more involved. I'm shooting. I'm starting to think a little bit about what's involved in hunting. And
bird hunting, right?
Yeah, bird hunting a bunch. I've hunted some bigger stuff, some deer a few times, but bird hunting is really what I find interesting. I also found target shooting, to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's relaxing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a part of our American heritage, and so I started to just get more involved. And then, years later, as I went to law school, I started to get more involved in the legal side of the gun rights movement. But the gateway drug, so to speak, was just buying a 5-shot Taurus 357 Magnum revolver and starting to carrying it with some regularity.
Nice. Oh my God, that's great. Was it a snub? Did it have a 4-inch barrel?
Yeah, it was a little snubby, and I carried it, and got poked in the hip for a number of months till I figured out, hey, maybe there's something a little slimmer, thinner.
Maybe I should move this.
Out of the 1960s into the
Oh my God, that's
2000s.
great.
Yeah,
that's great. My buddies make fun of me. I jokingly say that I'm a FUD, but I carry a 5-shot J-frame.
Yeah, look. I tell people, when people come to me for advice, what gun should I get? I said, look, if you're really not going to practice with this thing a lot, if it's going to sit in your nightstand, either in a gun box or not in a gun box, if you're in a house where you're not worried about unauthorized access to that firearm, that J-frame, it is going to sit in that drawer until you, God forbid, ever needed to go click bang.
Yeah.
It's the click bang theory, right? A semi-auto, you may not remember how to work that slide. You may not remember how to get that safety off and get that hammer to do what it's supposed to do. But boy, oh boy, a J-frame revolver, click bang.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
You get a dud round, click bang again.
Exactly. I always tell people when I teach classes, I say, look, if we talk about misfires, and if the semi-auto misfires, you do tap the magazine, rack the slide,
the cartridge pops out,
right? Yeah. I said with a revolver, if it goes click 2 times in a row, it's time to reload it.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, terrific.
Anyway, so getting people going. Got a J-frame.
Yeah.
Shotgun shooting, doing some bird hunting.
Yeah. And next thing I know, I'm growing up a little bit. I've got a job in Philly, and I've got some time. I'm in the IT business at this point, and I'm fortunate enough to sell my first business, my IT business, and it's right about then that I'm starting to get married. And I said, okay, I'm going to have a little break in the action here. What do I want to do? And I think, well, I've always wanted to go back to law school. Let's launch a couple of applications out there. And for reasons that remain a mystery to me, the University of Pennsylvania, which was my undergraduate alma mater, decided to readmit me. So there I am in law school, and my first semester of law school. I'm newly married. I'm actually a candidate for the state legislature in Pennsylvania at that moment.
Wow.
And I had gotten on the ballot to be a candidate for the legislature before I was admitted to law school. So I had to see that through, even though I was a newly married and a first semester law student.
Mm-hmm.
And I come out of law school and I go to work for a big firm for a very short while, and realized this was not for me to be at one of these big firms. I didn't feel like I would have the time or the freedom to do what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I leave the practice of big law, and I keep my own small law practice on the side, and I join up with some guys who also turns out went to Penn Law School, and they start a business outsourcing U.S. legal work to India. And outsourcing, not everybody likes outsourcing. It's got a reputation, but the good news is, as much as people hate outsourcing, they hate lawyers more. So we're outsourcing legal work to India, and nobody really objected to that. And we built that company up, and ultimately we're fortunate enough to sell it to a much bigger company. And I stayed on to get us integrated for a couple years. And while I was doing that, I was very much getting involved in the gun rights end of law.
Yeah.
This is right about the time Heller comes out. People are starting to really get serious about litigating in this area. They're paying attention to the scholarship that a lot of very forward-thinking scholars like my friend Steve Holbrook, my friend Dave Kopel, had been cranking out a lot of this scholarship in the wilderness, right? They're writing about how the Second Amendment is not some orphan part of the Bill of Rights. It's an integrated part of the Bill of Rights. It deserves the same respect. It deserves the same analytical framework as the First and the Fourth and the Fifth and the Sixth Amendment. And all that scholarship they'd been cranking out for all those years, once Heller gets passed, now suddenly we're in the game. And, I have good legal training. I went for an Ivy League undergraduate degree, an Ivy League law degree, and started to participate in, some of what was going on in the post-Heller era to really start bringing some cases, figuring out what cases to bring in what order. Mm-hmm. And I get on the radar screen of the folks at the NRA. And thankfully, I got on the radar screen of the fellow I mentioned earlier, Chris Conte, who was part of NRA ILA, right, the Institute for Legislative Action.
Right.
And they were the part of NRA that was bringing the cases to start shaping what the Second Amendment would mean in a post-Heller world. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to know Chris. He introduced me to a lot of the folks, the more serious folks that were getting involved in this, bringing these cases, bringing the scholarship to bear. And I got involved and was really able to participate in some of the foundational cases that NRA was bringing.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was really
an award from the ILA too, didn't you?
Sorry, I got I got an award. So Chris, I think long about the middle of the 20-teens, maybe 2012 or 13, ILA once a year awards what they call the Defender of Justice Award, and it's for people who got involved in the legal end of the Second Amendment movement and who have contributed in a way that NRA thought was praiseworthy. And it was frankly one of the most important honors I've ever been awarded. Chris was a good friend. He's gone now, unfortunately. Chris had a lot of really serious health challenges, and we lost him a few years back. But they did award me the Defender of Justice Award, and it really was so touching to receive that, because the Second Amendment means so much to me. Vindicating the Second Amendment, making it a part of the serious legal fabric of the Bill of Rights meant so much to me. And to be recognized as one of the people who participated in that effort in a serious way was a tremendous honor for me, and I was so touched when Chris gave me that award.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Really terrific.
So you're on the you get the award from the NRA ILA.
Yeah.
You're obviously on the what did you call it? You're on the periphery, on the view.
So
right, they start to recognize you and see that you're there.
Yeah, they start to recognize me. I get integrated into some of the litigation that's going on, and then I'm raising money for NRA also. I'm starting to get involved in some of that end of it. Mm-hmm. I have people that are coming to me from my law practice who've seen what it means for this Second Amendment to start to be reanimated and to have some life breathed into it.
Yeah.
And I met some great folks. Wayne Sheets, who used to be at NRA, used to talk about, part of our effort was to see if we couldn't, bring some friends a little closer to the campfire. Mm. That was the analogy he used. And I thought that was a really apt analogy, that, you have people that are interested in this story. They're interested in this narrative of the Second Amendment becoming better integrated into the legal framework of the U.S. Mm-hmm. Life is being breathed into it. The contours of it are being established. And our goal is to find people of means, people of influence, and to bring them a little closer to the campfire and see if we can't share this story with them and get them to share that story with other folks. And that's what we start doing. We're raising money, we're raising friends, we're raising funds, and some of the other folks at NRA see that I can contribute to that and start to get me more involved. And I wind up on a couple of committees of NRA's board. I wound up on the Legal Affairs Committee. Yeah. I wound up on one of the NRA board committees that was involved in bringing non-traditional constituencies a little closer to the campfire, racial minorities, sexual minorities. We brought those folks a little closer to the campfire, and we really were getting some work done. Ultimately, I gained enough. Oh shoot! I gained enough trust. We got it now. We got an arrow. All right. Ultimately, I gain enough trust that NRA puts me on the nominating committee, and I'm helping to establish, who some of the new board members will be. Mm-hmm. And so, I get involved in the committee work, and that's where I really start to see that everything is not necessarily going so good inside NRA. And I made some great friends. I started to meet some of the folks that are now involved in the reform movement. You're talking about guys like Bill Bockenberg, Tim Knight, who's a former director, yeah. Esther Schneider is a former director. And I start to meet some of these folks, Willis Lee. And then I meet some of the folks, who are board members. I'm not going to name names, but people who are, let's call it, less effective, who maybe weren't there for reasons that were wholesome. And I just start to scratch my head and say, how did this board get to be configured in this way? We just seem to not be all rowing in the same direction. If you're on that board and that board is the pinnacle for you of your gun resume, right? And you're there because 2 or 3 times a year you get a free trip to the Virginia suburbs and a couple of rubber chicken dinners, that may not be the right reason to be on that board. Right. If you're there to talk about what you can contribute to the gun rights movement today, and every time you open your mouth, the story you tell says, see, in 1981, we were back, and you don't understand. Well, right. You may have contributed back then, and we're grateful for the contributions you made. Right. But we're working with today. We're working with, with trying to negotiate the terrain where we've got anti-gun people and they're visiting with legislators and we're visiting with legislators. And, we're trying to put together a cohesive narrative around what the modern gun rights movement should look like. Mm. And we have to acknowledge that there's people who have different views than we have. Right. But, we can make the intellectual case for why our rights should be fulsome and muscular. And, if you're there in an AR-15 tie and saying weird things and poking that legislator in the chest saying, what part of shall not infringe don't you understand? That doesn't make you, a weaselly gun compromiser. That makes you a person who understands there's a modern conversation to be had here. Mm. And we can't do weird things. We can't say weird things. We can muscularly assert our rights, but that doesn't mean we have to sit on the social and intellectual periphery of our movement and be off-putting to, mainstream gun owners and mainstream non-gun owners as we make the case for why our rights matter.
Right.
And, we had, people on that board who just were there, and they were there because being on that board was the end-all be-all of their sense of what it meant to be passionate about this movement, but those people were not helping us to move the needle. And when you couple that with the fact that you had some real insiders who were just straight up looting the place.
Right.
I'm not going to rehash what we all know to be true now, but you had people that were using the organization's resources in ways that were unwholesome.
Sure.
Who were taking advantage of our annual member who scratched up 35, 65, depending on what the dues were over the years, $100, who were taking advantage of our $500 and $1,000 a year donors who were starting to step up and do more, and really treating those people savagely and poorly and not respecting the sacrifices they made to bring those resources to bear on behalf of gun owners. We did a bad job on behalf of those people in some ways. We did good things. We got Heller, we got McDonald, we got Bruen, we got New York State Rifle and Pistol. We did those things, and the small groups that eat at the periphery of the table we've set as the main gun rights organization. They fed off our table. The federal judges that we put in place, the legislators that we put in place, the cases that we ground through the lower courts to have the at-bats to shape the Supreme Court jurisprudence that we now have, that was NRA that did that. That was where NRA members who spent those dollars. And in that respect, we spent those dollars well.
Right.
But we didn't continue to earn the respect of those NRA members. And in much the same way, we started going to those board meetings and having those board members who weren't paying attention to the blocking and tackling. We lost sight of those members and lost sight of how to service them and respect them. And it's time for a new group of us, this reform slate that we've put together, to come in, restore that trust, restore that respect, earn those annual members, bring back those million or more annual members who walked away from us.
Right, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and just get back to basics, right? We have people that are interested in training. We have people that are interested in competitions. We have people that are interested in collecting. Certainly we have people that are interested in the political end of what we do. Right. Certainly we have people that are interested in the litigation end. But man, oh man, you certainly want legislatures in every state to say, boy, we need to know what standards to apply when somebody opens a range so that range can be safe and run correctly. Well, we're the group that set those standards. We're the group that figures out how to train new gun owners.
Right.
Our courses are the gold standard for safety. I mean, we spend way, way more of our budget on safety and training than we spend on politics or anything else. We have to tell that story.
Yeah, for sure.
For
sure. I just lost my train. Keep going.
So, we have to be able to talk. We have to be able to talk to legislators about why NRA has a seat at the table and has historically had a seat at the table. When people show up for military service, when people show up for National Guard service or Reserve service, the way a lot of those people learn to shoot tracks back to our original purpose, right?
Oh, yeah.
After the Civil War, the people that started the NRA realized, holy heck, we had a lot of people that showed up from urban areas who'd lost sight of that great American skill set of learning to shoot. They didn't live in rural areas. They hadn't encountered hunting. And if we want to have a citizen militia, if we want to have a tradition of hunting and personal safety and service in our military, we have to train people how to shoot. And we have to train them how to do it safely. Yeah. And we have to have those people be comfortable around arms. Well, even in the modern era, arguably more so in the modern era, we have to help the people who now live in urban areas, right? The U.S. is an increasingly urbanized place. We got to make sure that zoning laws don't exclude shooting ranges from urban areas. We have to make sure that there's muscular concealed carry rights in urban areas. Just because people are minorities, just because people live in an urban area, doesn't mean they shouldn't have the right to access this great American heritage.
Yeah, totally. I'm friends with Rhonda Ezell from the Ezell case, Ezell versus Chicago.
Yeah.
And when in 2013, after McDonald, she sued the city of Chicago because there was nowhere for her to go. Right.
That's right.
And I still don't think there's a range or a gun store in the city of Chicago.
I represent several of the gun stores in Philadelphia. Every town, the anti-gun group funded by Bloomberg, has paired up with the city of Philadelphia, and they are attacking all the local gun stores. They would love to eliminate all those gun stores. And the way they do it is they sue them, and we may eventually get the suits dismissed, but the process is the punishment, right? A gun store that's got a couple million, $3 million a year in revenues, they can't fight an AstroTurf campaign funded by a billionaire.
Absolutely.
And they're bankrupting these stores on purpose by design. Well, if there's no gun stores left in a place like Philadelphia, if there's no ranges left, right? We just actually filed a brief with the United States Supreme Court trying to get Philadelphia's exclusionary zoning of gun stores overturned. 1.3%, as I recall from our brief, 1.5% of the land area in Philadelphia is available for a gun store. And then once you find a location in those peripheral areas, all industrial, all places where no one can walk, all places where
public transportation.
Right. So poor people can't get to those stores.
Yeah.
People who have cars go to those areas and they think, God, where am I? You know, I'm in some
Thank God I have a gun.
Yeah, I'm in some warehouse district.
Right.
You know, the idea is to make these gun stores, you know, odious and awful and put them in areas where no one wants to be. And it's by design that these gun stores are excluded. Well, the idea is nobody will want to go buy a gun. Nobody will want to train, and they'll be able to choke out this great tradition. You know, only a group like NRA can provide model legislation, for example, to a state legislature that sees a thing like this happening in its big cities and tries to head it off, stop those cities from doing what they're doing.
Right. I was thinking about a couple minutes ago, is the politicians end up turning to the anti-gun folks because I don't think they want to hear the message from the pro-gun folks. But the anti-gun folks don't know anything about guns. And so one of the things they did here in Massachusetts is they changed the definition. And they changed the definition of a handguard to a barrel shroud. And now barrel shrouds are bad. But a barrel shroud is really something that goes over the barrel so you don't touch it. So it's really a safety feature.
Of course.
But they've outlawed having a barrel shroud.
Right.
And so they want, I've been telling people, I'm like, they want you to turn your handgun, they want you to turn your rifle into a handgun by only being able to hold it with one hand when you're firing it.
It's exactly right. And, you know, one of the things I've worked with our legislature, who, by the way, has been very good to gun owners in Pennsylvania. I mean, we have a really good, solid majority in the Senate in Pennsylvania that really understands our issues. We have a minority in the House now, but by one vote, mostly due to gerrymandering, when the state Supreme Court forced through on very short notice a map that favored Democrats in our House. But the legislature really understands in a lot of ways what we're doing. But we have something like 15 or 17 definitions of the word firearm in our statutes. So it's a real hash. I mean, and by the way, those 15 or 17 definitions are embedded in what is called, wait for it, the Uniform Firearms Act. So
we had that here too. So in Massachusetts, the old gun law is a firearm was a handgun.
Right.
And then we had rifles and shotguns.
Right.
In the modernization of this stupid bill that we have, or the stupid law that we have, let me step back. We have an approved firearms roster, which are only handguns.
Right.
And they added rifles and shotguns to the definition of firearms.
Right.
Like, it seems logical that everyone calls it a firearm, right?
Right.
Rifles, shotguns, and handguns are all firearms. But they did not update the approved firearms roster to include rifles or shotguns.
And there you go.
And so what the state has come out and said is, all right, listen, well, we know you can't buy rifles or shotguns because they're not on the approved firearms roster. Go ahead and keep buying them.
We promise not to prosecute you.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah. That brings a lot of warmth to the heart, doesn't it? We have that in Pennsylvania. Yeah, we screwed it up, but everybody knows what we meant. I'm not putting my civil rights at risk, risking a felony arrest because you said, it's no big deal. If it's no big deal, repeal it. Right?
Which they don't want to do.
Yeah, if it's no big deal to you, then you can undo it.
Oh man, it's so aggravating.
Yeah.
And I can't believe they're getting away with this stuff.
Well, they do get away with it, and that's why we try to stay very closely engaged with our legislature. And again, that's why a group like NRA is so important. It's the only organization with the heft nationally to do this. There are a lot of other smaller gun groups. They are important. They lend a hand. Mm. But without NRA, without that infrastructure, without that backbone that NRA represents, all the ribs on that rib cage won't have anything to sort of base off of, right?
I like that.
That's the NRA is the backbone. These other groups are the ribs.
That's a great analogy. I've been telling people that, and I've said this a bunch of times, I've got some friends that, like the idea of riding shotgun, and they're like, dude, I love what you're doing with the NRA. And I'm like,
right.
It's not the NRA, man. I'm doing this because I dig it and I like it.
Yeah.
I would love some of the NRA money, but I don't, I'm an NRA instructor and an NRA member and a life member and stuff, but I'm like, they're not behind what I'm doing. I'm behind what I'm doing because I love this and I believe in it and I think people should do it. But the point is that everybody thinks that if you're a gun guy, you're an NRA member, and that's not necessarily the case. Right. And the other groups, they fight all the other stuff. Like they're out there doing legal battles that while the NRA is taking the arrows from the anti-gun folks.
Yeah, and so you've raised a couple interesting things we should touch on. Number one, when you quiz gun owners, I can't remember the number, but it's some order of magnitude more gun owners say they're members than are members. So at our peak, when we had, call it 5 to 6 million members, you had 15 or 20 million people nationally who said, I'm an NRA member, because they may have been an annual member some number of years ago.
Right. It slipped, they stopped getting the magazines, they didn't notice.
So what that tells you is there is a great many people who would love to be affiliated with what we're doing. We have a broad base of support under gun owners. That's number one. Number two, you hit on something really important about support for your show, right? We have not spent a lot of time, and I know this, or I believe this from the time I spent around the board and its committees over a number of years, 10 or more years, I think, that I spent hanging around the hoop with these folks. It doesn't seem like we were having, at the board level, strategic conversations about where we were going to deploy our funds, right? It felt like there was a group of insiders that were just kind of putting money here and putting money there.
Right.
Some of that money was going into their pockets, we now know, right? But you would think, okay, we have X dollars available for range activities. We have Y dollars available for PR. We have Z dollars available for lawsuits. Let's sit down at the beginning of the year and figure out which horses we're going to back. We're going to make $100,000 available to find the 20 podcasters that are talking to younger gun owners, urban gun owners, minority gun owners, gay gun owners, right? There are all kinds of little groups that have popped up in the modern media landscape where you give a podcaster like that $4 or $5 to offset some of his expenses in the course of a year. He can make a lot of inroads for us with a particular constituency that maybe we're struggling to reach. Yeah. Bread on the waters, as it were, right? Same thing is true, with gun clubs. You have a fast-growing gun club in a geography that we're struggling to access. Maybe that gun club ought to get some support from us. Maybe it ought to get in-person visits. Mm-hmm. It seems like, and I know our hardworking staff at NRA was doing its best, to sort of make these kinds of things happen. Right. But that staff deserves a board that is also thinking strategically about how to deploy these dollars, that is going out to our donor base and talking to them about how to raise the dollars to do these sorts of things. Yeah. And that is publishing back to the general membership, this is what we're doing. This is why we're good stewards of your dollar. Here's the impact we've had. Over the last bunch of years, we have not done a good job with that.
Right.
And I'm committed as part of this slate of new board members to getting down to basics with a lot of that work.
Well, let's talk about, let's hone in on the board members. So there's 28 people.
Yeah.
Usually there's only 25, but we lost a couple to attrition. So there's 28 this year.
Yeah.
They all want to work together to make all these positive changes, to get back to some grassroots things that the NRA's been, that needs to focus on, is the training and the education and competition and stuff. I know in the past I've heard people say that we should bullet vote for candidates, but this time it's important to get these 28 people on the board, because if they're 28 people is going to be what, a supermajority, I believe.
Yeah, so there's 76 people on the board. We've got some good people on there already. Getting that 28, a group of 28 of us across the line is really important, right? You know, historically, the way you got on the board was you went to the guys in your gun club and said, bullet vote for me. Hey, mom, bullet vote for me, you know, that kind of stuff.
We're going to vote for the big name people.
Yeah, right. And next thing you know, you got Tom Selleck with a bazillion votes and he doesn't come to a board meeting. And look, having a guy like Tom Selleck hanging around the hoop, super useful in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
But we are now at a place where we need a working board. We need those 28 folks, all of us, to get across the line, because this board has to go to work. This board has to go to work building back the confidence of our staff, rebuilding our staff, rebuilding our fundraising capabilities, getting out and talking to gun clubs, to gun owners, to legislators, to regulators, and letting them know that NRA is back on the map. We're clean, we're well run, we deserve to get our seat at the table back. We deserve to be involved in these important conversations.
Yeah.
We are backing the kinds of strategic lawsuits that are going to advance our rights to the next level. And a working board with 28 great members as part of this NRA 2.0 slate is what we need to get that done. And look, if only some of us get across the line, okay, it could happen, right? But if members are hearing our message, if members are hearing it's time to step up and clean house, it's time to step up and get that working board back in there, they're going to vote for all 28 of us and get us all across the line.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a great thing. It's going to be really cool. And the ballots are out now.
Yeah.
People have until the beginning of April to get their ballots in. So this show's going to be coming out in mid-March.
Great.
I've got a whole playlist of all of the people I've had that are associated with the NRA and or running for the board of directors.
Great.
So I'm going to be publishing that, and I know that a lot of other people are sharing the shows, and there's a couple of Facebook groups where people are putting the shows out. And
great.
My objective is to get more people to learn who these folks are and how they got to where they are. I do think it's important that the board has a diversity of people in that they all have different skills and abilities, and the skills that you have as a business owner and the skills, the knowledge you have as an attorney is stuff that's going to come in very handy for the board.
I'd like to think, I mean, the folks that put this slate together were very thoughtful about it. We've got people from all kinds of different gun owning constituencies. There are people that are involved in state associations in the states where those associations, are meaningful and muscular.
Yeah.
We've got some of us who are lawyers. We've got some of us who are business people. We've got some of us who've had some economic success. We've got some folks in there who are, in touch with more of the working class roots of certain other gun owners. It's a great blend of folks who I think together are going to make the organization stronger. My particular skill set, certainly I'm a lawyer, but as you may or may not know, I also buy and turn around small American manufacturing companies. And I've had a lot of experience doing turnarounds. I've had a lot of experience refocusing and saving, organizations that were imperiled and bringing those organizations back from the brink, getting their finances sound, making sure that we're doing proper audits.
Yeah.
All those sorts of things are going to be a really important part of getting this organization back on firm footing and earning the respect of our annual members, our life members, our financial contributors, and the folks that are the workhorses that are going out and registering voters for us at gun shows. And we got to earn back the trust of all those constituencies. And the way you do it is you prove you're a good steward of their money, you're a good steward of their beloved organization, and just get back to basics.
It's exciting. I've heard, I talked to some people at the Great American Outdoor Show earlier this month.
Great show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And they said that they're expecting more turnout for this election than they have for any other election.
Yeah, I mean, the sad truth is that a lot of NRA members who are eligible to vote in these elections just don't. And we'd love to get those folks a little more invested. We'd love to get those folks, filling out those ballots and sending them back. The way we are going to get this organization back on track is for good, solid members to step up and vote for good, solid board members. Get that whole slate of 28 of us across the line, and we are pledged to turning this thing around. And that is my commitment. I was involved for a bunch of years watching a lot of ineffective board behavior. And I took a step back. And when I saw that, solid, bright, engaged, but disaffected board members were stepping up to help the board members that were there trying to do the right thing, I said, all right, it's worth it to put my time and energy and treasure behind this. And we're going to make a run at really, turning this thing around.
Very cool. Is this your first time running for the board? Have you been on the board before?
I have not been on the board before. I've been on some of the board's committees.
Yeah.
There was some talk at one point about putting me on the board. But what I now realize is some of the folks who were less effective were really systematically not looking to have more effective board members join the board. And so the carrot was dangled a number of times, and then you realize, what's going on? It seems like they're picking all these other folks. This doesn't make any sense.
They feel like government employees. Like, they're going to hire the new guy, but don't work too hard to make us look bad.
The next thing you know, you're like, oh, now I get it. They knew I had an audit background. They knew I had a legal background. That's the last guy
thing they want.
We want looking closely at what we're doing over here. So he can raise money and he can be involved in cases, and we like him, sort of down over there, but up over here, we don't.
Not so much.
And I met a couple of other folks that had the same thing happen, and then it became clear what was going on.
Wow.
So a bunch of us backed away, and then when the reform slate stepped up, I said, okay, now it's time to get involved.
That's cool. Yeah. That's great. All right, well, listen, we need to start to wrap things up here.
Sure.
How can people find you and your law firm? How can they find where the new board is, where the slate of members, slate of candidates are? Sure.
So my law firm, you can find me at goldsteinlp.com. That's GOLDSTEINLP. That's limapapa.com. And you can get my bio and find out what we do. We do a lot of gun rights work. We do a lot of other work, across the what I'll call right-wing ecosystem. My firm is not monolithic. We have some folks certainly that do a lot of work in a lot of different ways, but we do wind up representing a lot of organizations on the right because they know we can't be scared off. We're going to do that work. We're going to stick with these cases. We're not at a big law firm where they can threaten our bond work and can threaten to cut us from the government work. We're doing the Lord's work on these gun rights cases. And then in terms of finding the new NRA directors, we have a website where the new directors can be found. I believe it's
electanewNRA.org.
That's it. We'll put that at maybe the bottom of the screen.
And we will put that on there.
Let people know. And that's a great place to find out about all 28 of us. And really, if you look at the bios of all those folks, you're going to see that that we really do have a broad-based coalition of right-minded people who are going to do the hard work to get this organization back on track. So I hope everybody will take a look at that. And I hope we can earn back your trust. We can earn back your dollars. We can earn back your time. We can earn back your commitment to making the NRA the organization we all know it can be, having that respect in the courts, having that respect in the legislatures, having that respect in civil society, so that people will once again recognize NRA as the leading civil rights organization in America, because that's what it is. We've been at this longer than all the Johnny-come-lately ACLUs and all the rest of them. We've been at this since the 1870s, and we deserve your support, and our members deserve a board that is reflective of their passion, of the members' passion for our Second Amendment rights.
Very cool. Awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on the show.
This was great. I'm delighted to have done this. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for flying up here.
You got it.
I think this is great.
You got it.
It sounds ridiculous, but I think it's awesome.
It's terrific.
All right. Well, listen, if you guys have you've made it this far, thank you for watching the show. Thank you for tuning in. If you made it this far, please share it with your friends, because that is how we get the stagecoach across America. If you are not a member of the NRA, you should join the NRA. If you're not a member of the Second Amendment Foundation, there's a link below to join SAF. And you can find all of your favorite pro-freedom podcasts at sdrn.us. That's for the Self-Defense Radio Network. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks a lot.